a very warm welcome to Talking Europe. It would create the world's largest free trade zone, a deal that affects everything from feta to films. Negotiators hope to have a TTIP, and that's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, signed and sealed possibly by the end of the year. Supporters say it will boost business and lead to cheaper choices for consumers. Critics, however, say it gives companies too much power to sue countries, and it could weaken environmental and consumer standards. There's also questions surrounding the secrecy of it, with negotiations said to be held behind very firmly closed doors. So will this EU-US partnership actually free up trade, or is it about trading freedom? With me to help us understand, I have from the UK MEP Vicky Ford. You're with the Conservative and Reformist Party here in Brussels in favour of TTIP, or this agreement. Also opposite, I have from Belgium Maria Arena. You're an MEP for the Socialists and Democrats. You're sitting on the opposite side of the table, as that's where you are positioned on this particular debate. Beside you, I have from the Netherlands MEP for the Green Party, Bas Eickhout, also anti this TTIP agreement. And so back to Germany, and we have Inge Grasle, MEP with European People's Party, in favour of this deal. Let's start, however, very briefly for our viewers at home with a quick introduction to what exactly this deal is all about.
Americans and Europeans want to make an enormous pie, a free trade zone for 800 million consumers. Is the so-called TTIP. The problem is, both parties want to make this cake with their own ingredients and recipes. France has recently won an important victory. The culture sector will now be included in the transatlantic deal. In all other sectors, like agriculture, finance and services, norms will have to be harmonized. European and American spin doctors have been trying to find an agreement since July 2013. Who are they? A large number are technocrats from Washington, D.C. and the European Commission, but also businessmen working for various lobby groups. For their part, citizens feel cheated as they are never invited to partake in discussions happening backstage. But when the EU Commission did decide to ask for their opinion, the message was clear. 88% of EU citizens, for example, oppose the US proposal to install tribunals to enable foreign investors to sue governments. They say such a system threatens the democratic system and that financial markets should not be more powerful than states. Negotiators hope to sign a deal by the end of the year, then will citizens get a real taste of what's been cooked up.
Okay, well, one of the questions around this deal has been the secrecy surrounding it. A lot of, well, all the negotiations behind these closed doors, not so many briefings until recently. The text really out of the reach of a lot of people here in Europe. Is it a normal, abnormal level of secrecy, Ms. Grasle?
No, not at all. It's normal that when you negotiate, you need a certain kind of secrecy and also of confidentiality. And it's not only us, it's as well the United States. And they were much more keen on having the secrecy and having this confidentiality than we were. We have access to documents. The Americans do not have it. The American members of parliament, senators, they do not have this access we have.
Okay, because it's not a security document. You know, is this normal for trade then, Mr. Eickhout?
It is normal for trade agreements, but it is a bit, I would say, 20th century approach to still think that we have to keep everything secret. I mean, of course, at the final point when you are negotiating issues, then of course there is horse trading, so maybe you don't want to expose everything. But just from the outset, knowing what the position is of the EU, knowing what the position is of the US, and more important also the progress they are making during all these rounds. We are having now for years rounds of negotiations. I think the public audience deserves to know what is coming and what is happening there, and trying to keep that secret, it's a bit old style.
But before the deal is finalised, it needs to be voted through by all 28 member states. It needs a majority here in the Parliament. All the documentation will be out there in the public domain. It can't be just done in a closed room and then ushered through without we, who are democratically elected, taking responsibility. So those negotiations and those papers are all on the Commission website now. You can look at the detail.
Well, first of all, we don't have the US mandate. Secondly, we don't have in-between results. So not everything is on the website. Yeah, but just saying that not everything is on it. And thirdly, what is important, at the end of the negotiations, we can only say yes or no. There is no amendment possibility whatsoever. So it's just a yes or no. So of course, but you know what will happen. It's a press conference with Obama and Juncker next to it saying we have a grand deal, and then they will move to the parliament. You can't say no now.
You've had many opportunities.
There is a very big lack of transparency because it is not a trade agreement. It is more than that. We are dealing with some issues just like consumer protection. We are dealing with issues just like public services. It is not a trade agreement. It is more than that. So the privacy, the secrecy we have there is too big. We have to discuss more with people.
As a member of parliament, you can look into all these documents. You have the debriefing, you have the briefing.
I totally agree with you, but it's really strange.
Even in public.
It's really strange that, for example, industries have more access to this document before us. They read the document with the Commission.
You did evoke one of the fears, anyway, from people completely outside the negotiations, and it is that fear that putting the EU and the US together will lead to. It will standardise things, but also
here.
Okay. Well, let's clarify, because there's that race to the bottom fear.
We're going to have. This is about consumer protection. Now, so I chair the Consumer Protection Committee in our Parliament. We have very strong consumer protection in the UK and across Europe. We have very strong consumer protection in the US. We are not going to be forced to accept their standards. They are not going to be forced to accept us. But what I want to make it easy, I want to make it easier, for example, to take a British car, to take a French car, to sell that across the Atlantic. So the sort of technical thing we're discussing is, should you have the same seat belts, the same windscreen?
So it's not double testing.
This is simple. Double testing is okay, but when you have a body regulation corporation just to work before the standards, to have the industry to work.
Let's take a concrete example, because on food we have our standards. The EU is anti-genetically modified food. The US has genetically modified food, something like 70% of their processed. How does that work? Will we be buying?
In this deal
so we won't buy
forces
US
us
food.
to accept their standards or them to accept our standards.
So we wouldn't import products that have
It does allow the standard-setting bodies to come together and make suggestions, but we don't have to accept them. But there's a huge opportunity there as well, because the US, of course, isn't just talking to Europe. They've just been signing trade deals across with Australia, New Zealand and others. So this is a way that we can work together
stay on a
global level.
I mean, you have all your speaking notes. It's nice to do them in a row, but let's stick by one. We're now talking about consumer protection and to what extent the levels are being mixed together. I think what is very important is that we don't know exactly yet what will be exchanged. I mean, these are negotiations. At the end, we will have to accept something, they will accept something. How that deal will play out, no one knows, also you not. So it's not scaremongering, it's just reality, and let's be fair there. We have to be honest to the public.
But between now and the end of the text, we could perhaps have it in white and
at a certain moment, we will have to accept. But secondly, what is important, what is also discussed, is mutual recognition. So what can happen is that people say, no, okay, you have your different standards, but for that product, you have to allow it also on the European market because we agree to have mutual recognition. If that's going to happen, for example, on GMO, we don't know, it can be. If that's going to happen, you will have a pressure in Europe to lower our standards.
But it's true that US standards
there are US standards on some issues better, there are EU standards on others better.
For example, Dutch beef has only just been accepted back into the US market.
So, I mean,
and that's a massive market.
But that's not the point. The point is that this is not a traditional trade agreement. A traditional trade agreement is lowering the tariffs. That is what usually a traditional trade agreement was.
We already have pretty low tariffs.
Between the US and the EU, there are hardly any tariffs anymore. The big gain, where all those studies show where the big gain is by making sure that you have more comparable standards, that the industry can deliver the same product.
Out a lot of unnecessary
the point is, everyone is always coming up with technical examples, saying, yeah, but if this is technical, we choose the color of the wire.
It is not technical.
But the discussions are going way beyond that. A car, it's not only about the car shield or the windshield. It's really going into the safety of cars, which are different in the EU and the US.
Last year, EU pesticide rules, were they not shelved because of the TTIP?
There are some key negotiating parameters which have been set out there, such as we will not have a lowering of environmental standards or food standards or consumer standards. We can't be forced to accept theirs, and they can't be forced to accept ours. But there are areas where we do want to cooperate and bring together the regular. So, for example, digital sector. You know, the digital markets are key to European growth, and we need to try and establish not just EU-US standards, but those across the world. So let's work together.
But I totally agree with you when you say that it's better to have common standards, but not at lowering the standards.
And common high standard would appeal to everybody.
What we have
on this we can agree.
Is
lowering them.
how is it possible to have less standards? And it is coming from the multinational, coming from the United States, and coming from Europe.
If I may. So let's just talk about the example I had. You know, the motor industry is the big industry here that could benefit. And yes, we all want to have a better work post-Volkswagen, which is why the American regulators were already in Europe a few weeks ago saying, how can we discuss it? But if you look at things like their car standards, our car standards, sometimes they're just different. We have more crashes like this, they have more crashes like that. We shouldn't be forced. We are not going to be forced to accept one or the other. But while we can have them the same.
Because the car industry, the European car industry, wanted a report out to show that indeed the safety of the cars in the US and the EU was the same. They had a problem. It showed that it wasn't. It wasn't the same. It wasn't. And immediately the car industry was not putting out that report. The report was put out by a university who did the research and said, sorry, this is the truth.
So there you see. Different standards because they have.
And if we want to discuss them, we don't want to discuss them in a dark room. We want to discuss them politically, democratically controlled. And that's not what we're doing now.
But it's not that. There is a body regulation system.
I'm going to have to.
We have small lorries in Germany. We export to the United States. We build them, then we deconstruct them, export them, and the price is 12% more expensive in comparison with Japanese cars.
I'm going to have to move
line. That's the problem.
On this issue.
Where is it technical? Where is it political? And everything is now on the table.
But can I move on just very briefly? There's another very controversial aspect that has a lot of people out there worried. It's this ISDS, the Investor-State Dispute Settlement. If I understand correctly, this is always really part of trade deals. You have to have protection for companies coming into foreign countries that they won't be discriminated massively against. However, a lot of people fear that this, in relation to TTIP, will allow foreign US companies to sue EU countries. How can that be a good thing?
Well, you know, we need investment. Okay, we've had investor-state mechanisms to make sure that you can't treat a non-domestic investor, a foreign investor, differently from how you would do for your own investors. And indeed, we have those rules within Europe. Now, we've had, in the UK, we've had these agreements that foreign investors would be able to come and sue us if we discriminated against them. We've had that since the 60s, There's never been a case
successful. Sue against? Something like a protest?
So we need investment in Europe. We need investment in infrastructure. So what we have here is a lot of concern that are these foreign courts non-transparent, etc. So one of the big things that I think is beneficial here is let's, again, throw open the clarity, make the courts transparent, make the judges transparent. This is a huge opportunity. But at the end of the day, I want to see investment coming into our roads, to our telecoms, to our infrastructure. And if I need to go to foreign investors to get that money, they need rights.
There is no figures to explain that we need ISDS to have investment. I think that we have a lot of American investment here in Europe without ISDS. So we don't need ISDS because we have a juridical system in Europe that works.
But is the US going to sign up to that?
I don't think it does work because I've got investors suing.
So if you say that it doesn't work, you have to invest in the public court. But we have We have public court in Europe, and it works. It works.
Now completely irresponsible. What you are saying is completely irresponsible.
No,
you know.
no.
Let's get the facts a bit straight. First of all, investments from the US into the EU is already now 2,000 billion euros every year.
Yes, of course.
So there's a huge investment going on without this protection. So why they need it until now, it's not clear.
But we talk about the worst case.
Secondly,
We talk only about the small group of worst cases.
But we stand to,
it's
those in
difficult
favour
to make
stand
points
to-
when people are immediately
stand to gain
interrupting.
another 120
Secondly, there is a huge increase of these ISDS cases. In the 60s, we started for the first time, but if you look at the increase of cases, it is exponential.
Yeah.
Look at the numbers, it's exponentially growing. Thirdly, what you see more and more is that the industry is using this strategy to just attack governments for changes
Like
in
pressure.
policy. They say a change in policy is an unpredicted, unreliable government, and therefore we do it. I
And
call
remember,
democracy.
we
benefit the other way
Political
through.
majorities is
But
I
you
call
need-
democracy.
But of course you need to pay for
huge
it.
benefit
2
from
seconds
this
before.
is for French, British, German companies to be able to go and bid on public procurement contracts in America too.
is not
And
fair.
they want to be able to have those protections. So let's, by
win
all
rights
means,
in the other
improve
way.
the transparency,
the first-
improve the information, but don't scaremonger.
Well,
I don't want to see any
Last word,
additional
Mr. Riker, we're gonna have
benefits
to break it
for
up.
foreign investors compared to
Investors,
domestic
yeah.
investors. And you are creating an uneven
No one
playing
else.
field
in,
with
fair.
that.
No
in
one
any
else.
case, it looks like we're going to have a lot of debate to come, and it looks somewhat unlikely that we'll have this deal
I think so
settled
too.
and signed by the end of the year. Thanks so much to all my guests for having joined and trying to throw more light on this clearly very debatable topic for the moment. Thanks to you at home as well for having watched. That brings us to the end of this half of Talking Europe.